I get that. We will come to the economic questions in a bit. We have even Dr. Subir Gokaran joining us, but I have to take my first break. We'll come back. There is another newness in the if it is a Narendra Modi government, and that is he has spoken frequently that states will be partners in the development process. Is that a new beginning? We'll ask that question from our panelists in a bit after this short break. Welcome back to our special election exchange, A New Beginning. The question we are asking our star panel of guests is whether, given the circumstances in which the NDA government may come to power with a stable majority after a fairly long gap, is a stable government likely to chart a new course on several issues? Now, one of the things that Mr. Modi has repeatedly said in his election speeches has been that he will treat state chief ministers as partners in development. That could be a new beginning in the federal political economy. Let me go to the person who has seen the economy from various angles. Dr. Subir Gokaran, former Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, now with Brookings Institution. Dr. Gokaran, welcome, and tell me if this can recast the die of development, approaching the center-state relations very, very differently.
Well, I think there is an opportunity, as you said, if Mr. Modi becomes the Prime Minister, he will be the first state chief minister to have risen to that position. I would like to just perhaps, just to provide some historical comparisons. The premiers of China have often been mayors of Shanghai in their previous career track. So the idea of being a sort of person who can manage things, person who can coordinate, manage, motivate, and hold people accountable, having tested their sort of skills in that set of activities, obviously offers an opportunity to try and transfer that skill, that toolkit to the center. Plus the sensitivity of the benefits and the costs of the whole federal arrangement that we have now. Many issues which have held us back, whether it is the GST or water sharing or even agriculture, where there are sort of interstate issues when it comes to procurement and some states getting the benefit, others not. All of these, I think, require a perspective which will always benefit from the experience, the ground level experience, the state level. So I think that's an opportunity which the system has to take full advantage of. But the mechanisms through which interstate coordination takes place, we have two visible ones. One is the National Development Council, which operates essentially as an extended, we should say, an umbrella, if you will, of the Planning Commission. That's the process through which it gets channelized. And the Interstate Council, which is another mechanism by which state chief ministers exchange thoughts and so on. Plus, you've got the Empowered Group of Finance Ministers, which handles issues like the VAT and the GST. All of these have had some successes, but I think overall over the last few years, one can't call them, to categorize them as having been highly effective. So I think the ability of states to share experiences with each other in a systematic way, in a way which facilitates learning and replication, is going to be a very important part of the strategic process going forward. Because we, even with all of our concerns about growth slowdown and sluggishness and so on, we keep hearing about one state or the other which seems to have done things well. Now this is coming out in the campaign in a sort of somewhat obviously in a political way, but we need it to come out in a more technocratic way, in a way which focuses on what was done, how did constraints get dealt with, what was the solution, what was the governance mechanism. If we get a more objective and a more sort of, let's say, non-judgmental, if you will, platform on which this information can be shared, I think we will have created a very significant additional resource for both the center and the state to coordinate on more effective policy implementation.
Yeah, no, my point was that considering the mindset that Mr. Modi comes with, and again I'm repeating the caveat which Shankar and Anil and all of you have mentioned, assuming of course it's a stable majority and it's a Modi government with a stable majority, considering that he has repeatedly started off by saying that he will give states their due, is it that he can do things very differently? Mr. Kanawar, that comes straight away to you. GST. Saddled with, state opposition for so many years now, would Mr. Modi see their point of view differently and better and therefore resolve it, you think?
In fact, I totally agree with what Professor Gokaran stated. In essence, one of the key reasons why GST has been stalled is really the states perceive that this is taking away their autonomy. The ability to engage in a meaningful dialogue, ensure how there is no loss of revenue, which has already been done. There are several committees which have met up. There are several presentations which have happened to the high-powered committee to explain to them how there is no loss of revenue. It's really the loss of autonomy which is pursued by the states. And if that issue is resolved through a dialogue, that's one very important initiative which can be rolled out very, very immediately.
But aren't states making fairly tall financial claims on the center, Dr. Gokaran?
Well, when we have to look at the experience of the VAT, which was again a process that eventually took about 7 years to implement, and the push that it took was the promise by the central government to offset revenue losses if they occurred on very generous terms, which was the best revenue performance of the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the record, only 2 states, I think, actually made claims, and that also for only 2 years after the implementation, which basically meant that the budgeted amount was hardly used up. A small fraction of it is used up. I think what people didn't recognize was that when you bring an efficient tax system into play, particularly a self-enforcing system, revenue buoyancy is very high because a lot of people who weren't paying taxes before are now, in a sense, incentivized to do so. I believe the same will happen with GST. I think, it is reasonably practical to make relatively generous commitments for revenue loss offsets, because I think the buoyancy will sort of not activate those promises. So I think that's the way you go about doing this. You reassure people, you give people the sense that, hey, look, this is an important development for the country, and I know that you might end up losing, but we're making sure that you will not, you will not bear the burden of that loss. Here's a compensation mechanism. I think that's the way you need to go about it. And,
I take the financial, that buoyancy will, outweigh whatever perceived losses there are. But actually, Jay Panda of the Biju Janata Dal actually said that why doesn't the Prime Minister even visit state capitals? Sheer posturing sometimes can bring around politicians. Actually, on that point, Vinayak Chatterjee, there is enough data that the 300-odd projects that are left uncleared at the CCI level is because it is stuck at the state level. Now, if the Prime Minister assumes a different role of cajoling states much more than previous Prime Ministers have done, do you think these can be tackled better?
The answer is very clear. It is a resounding yes. And I think the issues in infrastructure are such that the new Prime Minister has to hit the road running, or if I may use an aviation parlance, he's to take the economic aircraft. He has to take off with the economic aircraft, but he's facing in the infrastructure sector very, very severe headwinds. For example, the first 2 years of the 12th plan have seen practically around 40 to 45% of the targeted investments. So we're off to a very poor start of the 12th plan. We've seen PPP confidence at its lowest. We have seen very little fiscal space left for public expenditure. We have seen almost 22 lakh crores worth of projects which are log-jammed, of which estimates say, in a sense, only about 4 to 7 lakh crores, or maybe 1/3 of them have got cleared.
Yeah.
We have federal versus state issues. And we have the huge legacy of unresolved problems in the power sector and a complete slowdown of the road sector. So these are the headwinds that he's got to face.
Yeah, I will revisit the problems of infrastructure in a bit. I'm only asking that because we have a minister, a prime minister who may probably approach center-state relations differently, may probably approach, going by what he has spoken so far, do you think projects stuck at the state level will do much better, will be declogged much faster than they were in the last 2 years of the UPA government? Is there a chance, or is it going to be continued, you know, Congress versus BJP, or AIADMK versus BJP? Will it continue to remain a political battleground, or will he be able to cut through the clutter?
No, wait. I think the important thing is that we can't personalize it to the extent that he will personally clear all the logjams. So the right way, in a sense, the right perspective to pose the issue is what institutional structure will he adopt to push or clear the logjam issue. Now, remember, there are a choice of institutional interventions. The first was the Cabinet Committee on Investment / Project Monitoring Group, which was chosen by the UPA in its last leg. Then there is the original proposal of Chidambaram to the Planning Commission in November 2013, which was the National Investment Board, and the Congress Party in its manifesto had suggested a NIFA, which is a National Investment Facilitation Authority. Finally, there are talks about potentially an infrastructure ministry or an FIPB-like structure linked to the PMO. There are even suggestions of reshaping the NDC, which Subir Gokarn mentioned a little while ago, that you actually have a far more empowered NDC where the Chief Minister sit and apparently with constitutional sanction clear logjam projects. Or you have the old mechanism of an empowered group of ministers, which is a mini cabinet. So the real question before us is, out of the various institutional mechanisms available to the new Prime Minister, which is the institutional mechanisms that he will choose to declog the system, which partly includes center-state relationships. So I would be actually posing the question with this perspective.
Okay, let me just get one more free-floating intellectual into this and then go to the other question, which is not new at all, deficit versus growth. But one more point from, okay, let me get Shankar in. Shankar, do you think that he's a man from the states, he knows how states behave, he has some of his own successful BJP chief ministers in the states, and no-nonsense chief ministers like probably Nitish and maybe even Jayalalitha. It's a fairly successful record even in Tamil Nadu of being able to push up electricity tariffs. Do you think this man with this past will be able to better tackle center-state relations and therefore infrastructure projects?
Well, there is a definite opportunity here. As a chief minister, he would have noticed many gaps between intent and implementation. Having said that, I want to make one correction. We've had 5 people who were chief ministers and who became prime minister. Morarji Desai, Charan Singh, Deve Gowda, VP Singh, all these people were chief ministers. They didn't do much and they didn't have time to do much. Okay, the point I'm making is Mr. Modi comes with a persona, comes with a perception of somebody who clears logjams. Every inch of India is ruled by the states. So the question that he needs to ask is, why should projects being put up in Gujarat or in Orissa or in Bihar need to come to Delhi? Why should industrialists come to Delhi? That is the question. If he addresses this principle of question, then things might flow from that. He also has a huge expectation baggage that he has to handle. And so he would want things to be cleared. And the projects that are stuck are not necessarily of the private sector. There are about 300,000 crore worth of projects which are actually public sector, state government, central government projects which are stuck. The railways is managed by the central government, Coal India is managed by the central government and has over 100 permissions. So how do you approach the issue of who is the beneficiary and who is the benefactor? So in any democracy, gains and pain have to be managed.
That's right.
Will he do that effectively? That is the story that one has to look at.
Okay, now that's a huge story since you've gone into several areas. But you know, I think the more boring topic or hackneyed topic of growth versus deficit is what he'll be faced with bang in the first 2 months. Probably because he's hit by a drought or likely to be hit by a drought, and of course because he has to you know, pass a budget. That question to Shubir Gokaran and to others after this break in a minute. Welcome back. This is Election Exchange, a new beginning. They are asking a team of experts from various fields whether whether a possible Modi government with a possible stable majority can strike new beginnings on several issues. But the issue I'm now going to tackle is a hackneyed one, but one that is on the top of the agenda for the new government: a possible drought, of spillover on the fiscal front of unpaid bills, and promises, for instance, the food security. The first year when the food security bill will have to spend perhaps all its 1.3 lakh crore, perhaps. So onerous demands on the fisc, and exactly at that time, inflation refuses to climb down, is at 8.6%. Dr. Gokaran, would it be possible for the Prime Minister under such circumstances to adhere to the fiscal deficit and yet, you know, promote growth?
Well, first let me thank Shankar for correcting my memory lapse on state chief ministers who went on to become prime ministers.
Yeah.
Only one of the 5 that he named stayed a full term. Let's hope that, you know, the precedent, that precedent works. And also, you know, as a reform, as a sort of precedent for taking the economy and putting the economy onto the growth path, I think that's important. But I think, you know, coming back to the point about the fiscal growth dilemma, I don't think we can get away from the fact that there is no, you know, short-term fix here. There's no quick repair job, band-aid, bandage, and you know, outpatient, if you will, solution. It's really a matter of putting the right strategy in place. And so even if there is a 1-year shock, I think the way to deal with 1-year shocks is to have a long-term plan. And if you have the kind of majority that the polls are suggesting and the stability that comes with it, you can afford to make longer-term commitments with some credibility. I think that's the biggest opportunity that the new government will have if in fact these predictions come to pass, and they have to make the most of it. Now the thing here is that when you take a
Dr. Gokaran, are you trying to say that he can kitchen sink this year and say, sorry, I'm not keeping my targets, but I'll be very careful with targets next year and give aggressive targets to himself?
I think when you have exactly when you have a strategy, you've got to lay out the strategy. You've got to lay out the time path. You've got to lay out the specific milestones that you hope to achieve in each year, and you know, obviously there will be some risk there, but when you have a 5-year horizon, you have to use that 5-year horizon, which means saying, hey, look, we know there is a problem overall. There is a problem with subsidies. There is a problem with government capital spending. There's you know, which deals with infrastructure, and there's an issue with tax reform, which links up to DTC and particularly to GST. I'm much more, I think, emphatic on GST. These are the things that we have to do in year 1, year 2, year 3, whatever. Now, during that period, we will have shocks. There will be a drought shock this year. There may be another drought in a 5-year period. There may be another external upheaval, some sort of a financial you know, disruption. Who knows? But if you have a plan and you are able to basically convince people that you're going to stick to that plan, you're going to do the right things on subsidies, you're going to do the right thing on capex, you're going to do the right thing on GST, I think people will be willing to give you the space to accommodate the shock when it's necessary.
Yeah.
You remember when the UPA 1 presented its first budget, there was a pause on the FRBM for 1 year. But you know, eventually fiscal consolidation did take place. So I think the longer term horizon and you exploiting it to put down very clear goals and milestones, and you know, sort of act in accordance with those milestones every year, even if you're doing a little bit of a course correction. I think that's the way to go about this. You can't say, hey, look, this is a one-year story, there's fiscal correction is needed, but there's a drought coming or there's something else coming, so let's just forget about it and not worry about the next 4 years. I don't think that's the kind of message that needs to be sent. We have to have a 5-year horizon, we have to have a 5-year plan, not in the way that we've been defining in the past, but a fiscal strategy, and that has to provide the room to accommodate specific shocks like a potential drought.
No, that we have seen them do that before, and perhaps even for the UPA one that could be achieved only because they did not have double-digit inflation chasing them for the past 5 years. In this case, one more year of big deficit is one more year of double-digit inflation. Anil Padmanabhan, you think he can bring... Yes, sir.
Can I finish my point? That actually requires a separate agricultural strategy. So with every stress point, you have to have a long-term strategy. You can't just say fiscal and that's going to address all your problems. Every problem requires a specific strategy. They have to be interlinked, they have to be dovetailed, but they require specific strategies. I think that's really the priority for the government in the first few weeks or months, is to start to articulate these sector-specific or these stress point-specific strategies which somehow get interlinked. That's really where the credibility is going to come from. That's really where the reassurance is going to come from.
Yeah, Anil Padmanabhan, your take on this, there is a big fiscal mess and there is a potential of a drought. Is there anything new that can be done in terms of at least using the, buffer stocks much more actively than has been used so far? Something more active in terms of probably Aadhaar or some kind of identity linked subsidies. Anything do you expect that something new can be done to tackle this old mess?
See, Lata, the one good thing for him will be that sentiment management. I think he has to politically manage the sentiment, which he has partially done with the fact that this government is finally departing. So foreign investors, domestic investors, all stakeholders seem to be breathing a sigh of relief that this government has left. So he is inheriting actually a much bigger fiscal mess than what we are seeing on paper, because I think a lot of the fiscal deficit problems corrections are on paper and they have been outsourced to the next government by the sitting finance minister. So it is not that they have achieved fiscal correction. But at the same time, like Shubir said, that you have to have a long-term agenda. So the key is managing sentiment. So if I were him or the finance minister, I would be very honest with some kind of white paper which puts everything in perspective, sets out a 5-year fiscal correction plan, and all this is already there. It's not that it has to be reinvented. The 13th Finance Commission report of Vijay Kelkar set out a clear blueprint for fiscal correction. Obviously, it has to be updated. The FRBM, which has been suspended, has to be restored. So foreign investors are smart people. They have seen this. They want credibility. I think the word Shubir was constantly using was credibility. I think that is very, very important. So he knows it. I think Narendra Modi knows that very well. So this budget will not be used to give you a quick fix solution to the long-term problems, but more to managing sentiment, to get that breathing space, because this honeymoon will last for at least 6 months with the foreign investors and with domestic economy. So in that period, he should consolidate and move forward.
That, of course, what new things he will do, we will have to see, because the fiscal mess is going to be definitely the biggest challenge that he faces immediately in the first 2 months in office. And the bigger problem will be tax, Mr. Kanabar. What can be at least the one big thing that can be new, or at least big and different in the budget in terms of taxes?
I always believe that tax is a tail and business is the dog. And you can't have tail wag the dog. And unfortunately for us, in the last couple of years, last 3-4 years particularly, the tail has been wagging the dog. I think what we are seeing really is a very aggressive tax administration. Mr. Modi coined this term, tax terrorism, which was quite amusing and I think really reflective of what mood you see at the ground level.
Can you do something in the first budget itself?
So first is, are you signaling to the world at large that you are stable in your policy? So, for example, the retrospective amendment, the first thing he could do is to make it prospective. Because here was a situation where everybody was aware that a matter was in the courts for several years. If the government wanted, they could have really come out and clarified at that point of time. You can't say that I go to the Supreme Court says this is what the law is, and then you say no, but I'm clarifying now that this is what I meant when I enacted the law right back in 1961. It sends a very, very wrong signal. When I go and meet up with investors across the world, you find yourself in a bit of a quandary as a citizen, forgetting as a professional, to say, how can you justify such a thing? And then, to the point which you made regarding how can you make a fiscal correction, there's such a lot of money which is locked up in tax litigation. Unclogging it is not such a big thing at all. You really need to put time frames on how decisions will be taken. Again, not a very difficult thing at all. And finally is this issue regarding black money, the monies which are lying, what we speak about in Swiss bank accounts. There are a number of solutions on the table. There is a need for a political willingness. And if I just put a practical perspective here, there has been always this talk that you want to get monies back from Swiss banks, great thing. But why would you not enter into a treaty with Switzerland the way UK has done, to say if anybody does not want the names to be disclosed, tax will have to be paid on that money. Okay. And the amount of money which UK has collected runs into billions of pounds. Why would you simply not at least collect the tax?
That certainly looks like a new avenue that Mr.
So there are a number of things which can happen. They are not very difficult to do. They require a political will, and they require somebody who's willing to take administrative decisions.
Okay, so their new paths can be chartered. I believe we are running close to the last 5 minutes. Saurabh, what would you expect in terms of big bang or new that the government can be capable of delivering simply because it has a stable majority?
I think we'll get a big pullback in social welfare schemes. They might not say it as bluntly as I'm saying it. I think the way it'll be couched is that social welfare schemes in REGA, right to food, right to education, I think they'll say that it'll be made more targeted, but I'm pretty sure that in the next 3 or 4 months we'll see a big pullback in social welfare spending. I think it'll be part of the forthcoming budget. That combined with the diesel deregulation that the previous government has pushed through, potentially with changes to the fertilizer regime, I think there's considerable fiscal wriggle room there that the incoming government will use to pull the deficit towards 4% of GDP. I think that construct is relatively clear in the forthcoming budget. The recapitalization of public sector banks, the government will push the bill onto the FII community and say, look guys, here's a QIP, why don't you come in and participate? A pullback on social welfare spending, I think, will be the biggest bang we'll hear in the current budget. It has considerable ramifications for rural India and for a whole range of companies which have benefited from that social welfare largesse.
Okay. Well, finally to you, Vinayak, the big problem will be infrastructure. I promise to come back to you on that. Anything new that can be done over there to tackle a very, very old problem?
In terms of immediate tasks, I think you're going to see a massive emphasis on railway development. What road was to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, in my view, rail will be to Narendra Modi. Secondly, in their manifesto, they have spoken very strongly about a land use authority. I think that will be a good step so that the whole issues of, the scare that industry has about availability of land, that's going to be big. Third is the resetting of the entire infrastructure financing scheme. I understand that the RBI governor is very actively engaged on resetting the entire paradigm of funding for PPPs. I don't want to get into the detail now, but that's certainly going to happen. So, as I said earlier, a new institutional mechanism to handle infrastructure and clear log jams. So I'm keen to see what institutional mechanism, out of the 4 or 5 choices that I enumerated earlier, I'm keen to see which instrument he picks up to actually push infrastructure.
All right, gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me, but it looks like me, the panel also at least largely is expecting that a lot of new things could be done, at least in a new way. For instance, prospective, changing the tax laws to make it prospective and not retrospective can be one big signal. Social spending, being made asset creating or well targeted can perhaps release a lot of money. Infrastructure, a whole set of new things that Vinayak has been telling us, and perhaps even something different in terms of using the states more creatively and more actively, state chief ministers more actively than has been done in the past. All this could add up to something new. So, well, when I said new beginning, it was more a matter of hope, but you gentlemen are putting some flesh and bones into those hopes. It is possible that maybe Mr. Modi, if he becomes the Prime Minister, with the stable majority that the exit polls are predicting, could chart a new beginning in several old issues that have stuck this economy in a rut of 5% growth for the past 2 years. Well, all of you, thank you very much for joining me in this encouraging and enthusiastic discussion.